Good afternoon and welcome to the Shareholder Committee. There's myself and Councillor de Gorn. There's the councillors here, and we have a whole array of different businesses reporting back on their business plans. So without further ado, I will go through the agenda. So first of all, declarations of interests. Any declarations from you, Councillor de Gorn?
Just from the, it's not a prejudicial interest, but from point of view of transparency, my partner, Councillor Craghill, is a director of Make It York, which is obviously one of the reports that we have.
Okay, I'll take it as that's not a declaration of interest because it shouldn't be prejudicial in any way. So I don't have any. So moving on to the next point, minutes of the meeting. I'm happy to approve the minutes. Councillor de Gorn?
Oops. Yes, happy to approve the minutes.
Okay. The third item is exclusion of press and public. When we get to the stage of the meeting where we are discussing commercially sensitive items for each of the businesses, we will be excluding the press and the public, because otherwise it gives, as everybody's aware, the competitors for these businesses an unfair advantage. So then moving on to item 4, public participation.
I'm happy to agree to that exclusion of press and public.
Sorry, I forgot I should be doing that as well. Apologies, Andy. Apologies. So moving on to item 4, public participation. Have we got Gwen in the waiting room?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, fantastic, Gwen. Yes, excellent. Right. Well, you know the form. Yes. You know that it's 3 minutes. So I'll start the clock now.
Thank you, Chair. May I say how deeply disappointed I am with this agenda, with the conflicts of interest evidenced and the complete lack of information provided in the public domain and by its non-standard format. This committee was supposed to give some measure of confidence and transparency regarding the many tens of millions of services we pay for provided by these various TCAL businesses. Unbelievably, there is more information in the public domain than is presented here in this fag packet, trivial public report pack. No mention of overdue Companies House filings by YTO or until yesterday's City of York trading. Chair, I know this administration is trying to get to grips with these issues, why in fact you are the chair. I hope you will be as concerned as I am that all but one report presented is in non-standard format, as if intended to obfuscate. Reports in the forward plan are assigned to conflicted officers or, shockingly, non-council company men. Surely standard format, peer-checked and chief officer signed-off reports need to be presented by staff and staff who are not conflicted directors. Neil Ferris is clearly conflicted, as is the company man Max Thomas. Chair, a quick review of Companies House data shows that in TCAL companies we own, the council does not have majority director votes, as is, I understand, the requirement under TCAL legislation in order to exercise control. May I say that despite transparency obligations for these companies, none I have approached has respected their legal obligations regarding FOI. As an investor and shareholder of the Municipal Bond Agency, we have never had a report here or anywhere. Are there more shareholdings being kept from us? Chair, I am concerned that for one or more businesses, we may be in breach of TCAL as well as state aid rules, particularly in the case of Make It York. The governance and transparency obligations of these companies need oversight by Audit and Governance, please. I understand that some sort of TCAL governance review may be in the ether. May we see the terms of reference and have a proper chance to input? Staff and member conflicts cannot continue, nor the non-standard reporting or secrecy of this committee. Finally, Chair, because so much is secret, we have no sense of the ways this council's economic, environment and other priorities are expected to be translated into actions of these TCAL businesses. Thank you, Chair. I'll send the notes in as usual. Hello.
On mute, Paula.
One day I put it on mute because I was drinking my cup of tea and
Oh,
didn't
good.
think anyone wanted to hear me slurp. So
You haven't gone to
apologies,
sleep,
Gwen, for
have you?
that. No, not at all. Gwen, your comments
Good.
will be noted and taken into account.
Thank
And
you.
just for your confidence and to reassure
Mhm.
you, myself and several of the officers have had quite a number of conversations over the last week or so. So I will send you something in writing as well. I'll wait for yours to come through, and please be assured nothing is being done in secret. We are not in breach of state rules and etc. And I have the evidence to show you.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
we'll
Jen.
have a conversation later. Thank you ever so much.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so moving on to the rest of the meeting, we have a number of businesses that are going to make a report. So we have Veritau, the City of York Trading Company, Yorwaste Trading, Make It York, and YPO Procurement Holdings. Given the nature of the reports, what I'm going to suggest is that each of the businesses does a public report, says what they wish to, so that everybody is aware of what is happening inside of their business plans as much as is allowable given commercial confidentiality. And then we will go into private session where we can discuss them in more detail. Councillor de Gorn, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that approach. I would just say, I think it's worth us taking note. As you said, we will respond to the concerns that the public speaker raised, and certainly, I think if there is a review, our Jenny Berry may be able to sort of give us more information on that in due course. But if there is going to be a review of the governance arrangements, certainly I think one of the comments that we've had passed through was about the presence of officers. I'm not sort of sure of the actual sort of protocols, but it would seem to make sense that the officer who's leading on any particular area that's covered by these companies should be here, as well as a representative from the company.
That's all being planned. You've jumped ahead.
Okay,
Janie's already got that under control. So
I mean,
during,
the other point,
during April, all the governance and guidance around the TECL companies is going to A&G to be discussed. So it is in the public domain and it is being drafted. It's just this meeting has happened a couple of days before everything is finalised.
I think the other thing I was going to say, since you've mentioned audit and governance, obviously this is one that Jenny probably will be discussing with the chair, but I would hope that these reports at least go to the chair of audit and governance, and then in appropriate confidence. But if they feel that any of them then need to be subject to further scrutiny, then that should be down to the chair of audit and governance to discuss in confidence before deciding what next to do with that.
Okay, noted.
Yep. Thank you.
All right then. So if we move on, can we have the presentation or the update, please, from Veritau? Max, it was just all the screens are blank, and I'm going, where is everybody?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Max Thomas. I'm the Chief Executive of Veritau, and with me in the meeting today is Richard Smith, who's the Deputy Chief Executive.
Welcome.
Thank you. So if we start with the current year, as set out in the covering report, obviously COVID-19 has had an impact on how we operate and on some of our work. All our staff have been working at home since last March, and that has necessitated an investment in additional laptops and other equipment to support that. We also established a multidisciplinary COVID-19 response team right back in March, and that was to support all our member councils, including York, and that team was providing advice. It was producing forward risk assessments, and in particular, it was involved in doing pre and post assurance work around COVID-19 business grants. So whilst there have been challenges directly caused by COVID, overall it has still been a successful year. We've continued to attract new clients, particularly schools and multi-academy trusts. Client satisfaction and retention rates remain high. Staff satisfaction is also remains good. What I have done is listed some of the other key service developments and achievements in the covering report, and those hopefully show that we've continued to make progress despite some of the challenges that we've experienced this year. So overall, we do expect to meet our financial targets. That there have been no issues or other concerns that I'd wish to sort of share with the shareholder committee. Overall, it's been a good year, as I say. Just to note, we did have one change in the composition of the board. So Ian Floyd has resigned, and his place has now been taken by Debbie Mitchell. So that's the current year. Looking forward to next year, we are presenting the full group business plan. This has been discussed and agreed by each of the 3 Veritau group companies. I have summarised some of the sort of key messages from the business plan in the covering report. So we do expect turnover and profit to increase slightly compared to this year. And in terms of sort of priorities, what we're looking to do is sort of develop some of the capabilities and service offerings that we provide. So that includes developing our data analytics and IT audit capabilities, promoting our new information access service, and starting to develop a new information cybersecurity advice service. So we've got some good plans in place to further develop the business, and also to improve the offering to our existing and prospective clients. What we also would like to do is actually embed some of the changes in working practices, so that we sort of we retain some of the efficiencies around agile working and the like. So that's a sort of quick summary of our priorities for next year. Obviously, very happy to take any questions on either items from this year or next year's business plan.
I've got a question, and then I've got some other questions that I'd like to ask you later, if that's okay. But one of the questions that we all know, because the letters have come out and the PR is happening and all the other malarkey around it, what plans have you got in place for the local government reorganisation? Because looking down at where your bread and butter work comes from, that has got to be, depending where you're sitting, either a significant threat or a significant opportunity.
There's clearly potential threats depending on which way the government goes, but equally there might be some opportunities, and whichever choice is made over the next few years, the work that we do for our member councils is going to be important in sort of implementing whatever changes are made to structures and services. So initially we see there will be a real need for our services. What happens after that is there's clearly a degree of uncertainty, and there are some risks to the business, particularly in sort of the need to provide the sort of volume of service that we're currently doing.
Oh, I'll remember to unmute one day. Andy, do you have any questions?
No, that's fine for this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Many thanks, Max and Richard. And we'll move on to the next company whose list I've lost, is the City of York Trading. CYT? Can't see them.
That should be Karen, Chair, Karen Bull.
Okay, Karen, have we got you?
Hello there. Yes, you have. Apologies.
That's okay.
Okay. You've got a number of different pieces of paper before you, but I'm going to cover the Shareholders Update Public Report at the moment, which is a general overview of the last year and a little bit about what our plans are going forward. So generally, inevitably, COVID has affected not only our own staffing team in-house, but also our clients across the board. And as a result of that, our financial position across the year. We were able to utilise the coronavirus job retention scheme, or furlough. In the very early stages of the pandemic, we actually furloughed a large number of staff that were effectively laid off by a large proportion of our clients, specifically when schools closed down. CYC cut quite a lot of their staff who are working in school-related businesses such as cycle training and York Learning and that kind of thing. During the course of the pandemic, what we've tried to do is introduce more of those furloughed staff to other assignments that have come in, and that has been particularly successful of late, so that actually in this third lockdown, we've only had, I think we've had a maximum of 20 staff at any one time that's been furloughed, and that's down to about 17 at the moment. And that includes people who've got continuing health problems and caring responsibilities. Other staff who are flexible and available for work, we have attempted to redeploy them into different roles, but notwithstanding that their primary and principal roles that they were in previously are not then available. So that's been quite successful. That is generally what we're trying to do as a business. We're trying to provide sort of continuity of employment for as many people as possible, rather than, you know, one-off and then they disappear. So just keeping those people constantly engaged. Our work with schools has been a very up and down year. Schools have been in and out and then sort of back, but not properly. We've kept engaged with schools throughout the whole time, and we have continued to provide supply staff throughout all of the lockdowns. However, our schools business has been significantly hit in terms of the finances during that period, just because the sheer number of people that we would normally send out has not happened. I'm pleased to say that as at this week, in fact, starting today principally, we've started to have loads and loads of inquiries from schools for next week and onwards, and quite a few longer term bookings are coming in now. So schools have kind of all woken up to the fact that they might need some more people. We're also talking to schools about COVID testing staff as well. So on the commercial front, we have big plans for work with Yorkshire, which was our new commercial brand, to go out and win the world. Unfortunately, it launched, I think, the day after lockdown. So it didn't quite happen in the way that we planned. But what we have been able to do during that time is we've been able to engage with a lot of local businesses and contacts. We've made a lot of connections. And we have worked with our existing commercial clients who, again, have been affected by COVID. They have had requirements. We have filled those requirements, but the volume, again, has been significantly down on previously. In terms of CYC work, the response times and the volume of staff needed by CYC has been very up and down through the year. There's more detail in the confidential information that you've got, but I have put in my public reports some details of the COVID response that we've assisted CYC with. So during December, we first of all provided some lateral flow testing staff to the York St John site, and come the beginning of January, CYC Public Health came to us and said they needed a huge number of staff then to go into the University of York. Subsequently, we've recruited more staff for the community stadium. So I think we've got around 150, 160 staff now across those three sites, and they are principally, along with obviously colleagues from public health, responsible for the figures that I've given you there. 22,700 tests have been completed between December and January, and that was very early January, so since then a lot more. The COVID marshals that I think you've probably heard quite a bit about, and their successes in terms of engagement are also actually work with York staff. So we recruited those people for public protection back in November, and those people are also assisting with the COVID response. So just wanted to kind of put it in perspective that work with York have been kind of instrumental in assisting CYC to kind of fulfil that quick COVID response where a huge amount was needed to be thrown at it quite quickly. We've done some work on our websites over the years. We've been working on social media as well. Ordinarily, we run an annual awards event for staff, but we've not been able to do that this year. So we've tried to engage in all sorts of other different ways. Our business plan sets out what we're hoping to do over the next year. I'm not going to go into detail in here, but it certainly is the case that we will be profitable this year, and our business plan sets out that we will have a better profit situation next year.
Thank you ever so much for the public report, and you can see through your numbers how much you have engaged with the city and how much you've delivered regarding the testing, regarding the reassurance of visitors and residents right the way across our city. So thank you for that. I don't have any questions. I've got some questions for later, but not for now.
Okay.
Andy?
No, again, just to say thank you for all of that. As you say, it's been really useful having that quick response and that facility to help local people get that work, but also provide that essential rapid response to the COVID situation. So I'm sure that has been, I know it's not what you would have chosen to be doing, but it's, you know, we've been able to respond quickly and help support the city in that way is excellent.
As recruiters, you don't really get a choice. You do what client asks for. So.
Well, many thanks, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Janie, can I ask next time we get the papers out, because I'm beginning to feel a bit rude, that we put the names of the people that are going to speak next to the company, because I'm guessing this is Sandy, but I really don't know. Okay, so if we could,
I believe it is, but yes, we can amend that for next time, Chair.
Please. Okay, could we have Yorwaste Trading, please, with their update? It is Sandy, I did guess right. Thank you.
Nice to be remembered, Chair. Thank you. If I could just start, I guess we are majority owned by North Yorkshire, minority owned by CYC, but both of you are valued shareholders. Just to sort of address one of the earlier concerns from a TECO perspective, we do have that independently verified on an annual basis to make sure that we comply with the 80-20 rule. That is one of the key elements for TECO. The other one is that the authorities can dictate the day-to-day operations. That's managed in two ways. One, through the operational waste teams, who basically are in regular contact with our teams to make sure that we're delivering the service on a day-to-day basis. And then strategically and financially via the board, which has a majority in terms of its composition and its voting perspective. So we do comply with that, and we do keep an eye on that. In terms of governance, we have also had that recently sort of checked. And the one sort of recommendation that came from that we've already implemented is the need to provide refresher training and director responsibilities to directors. And we've already arranged that, and that will be coming up in one of the next board sessions.
Perfect.
Thank you. In terms of the current year, I won't go over section 1 in our sort of report, because I think that's really there to remind people that it's not all about bottom line profit. It's also about top line cost and all the intangibles that are come with that. Moving on to the current year, this has been a good year for Yorwaste, despite the fact that we've had sort of COVID impact. Health and safety has done well. We had the lowest ever incident rate of lost time injuries per head in December, and we've achieved ROSPA Gold. In addition, we've now put fire deluge systems in almost all of our sites. These are these have been developed in-house, they're insurance approved, and they are significantly cheaper than many of the other industry options out there. And whereas previously we were looking to have to ration it to certain sites, because of the solution that we've developed in-house and in consultation with some local businesses, we're actually able to put it into all our sites, which then significantly reduces our cost of waste fires going forward. In terms of environment, the investment that we put into the liquid treatment plant a couple of years ago, long overdue at Harewood, that's allowed us to get the leachate head levels well under control, but specifically it's meant that this has been the first year with absolutely no issues in terms of drainage when we've had the flooding in previous years. Now, the flooding at Harewood was localised, but what it did do was it impacted operations, and it could impact on some of the recyclate that we had lying about. We've managed to avoid all of that this year, which has been good from an operations perspective. In terms of PAS 100, we now have PAS 100 at Seymour, Tancred and Harewood. So all of our compost, with the exception of some small off-site farm compost, is now being put through the PAS 100 service. Excuse me. In terms of climate change, we had planned to do ISO 50001 energy management last year. That's the first stage in a plan where we do that, which then sets a baseline that then allows us to go for Carbon Trust accreditation. So we've now delayed that. We are getting on with that this year. We started that process. And then that will then help inform and direct our future carbon reduction strategies. But in the background, what we have done is we've put solar panels on our head office. We managed to get that in before the feed-in tariffs were closed. And given that head office has been closed for the vast bulk of the past year, that's turned it into a profit centre rather than a cost. So that's been a good sort of result for the current year. We are also looking at sort of options for carbon reduction, specifically solar panels at our closed landfill sites and for those waste transfer stations where they have sufficient sort of roof space to allow us to do that. It was important for us to get the fire deluge systems in before we put in roof-based installations. Otherwise, you could have a fire that would take out your roof and therefore effectively undermine your investment. So we've got a plan for that. Our COVID response this year was robust. We off-hired excess vehicles that we had on short-term hire. We furloughed only those employees on commercial contracts. For the avoidance of doubt, we did not furlough anybody who was on a TECO contract. That would have been double dipping and was morally and ethically wrong. We've made further reductions on our management headcounts. We reduced non-effective cover. And what I mean by that was we made sure that people took holidays throughout the year and didn't just delay them until, whilst they were on furlough. We made sure they took holiday. And the opportunity there was, if you don't backfill those roles, you're also saving on your non-effective cover. We postponed non-essential maintenance. We've accelerated cost plans, and we've had COVID-safe working practices at all sites. Obviously, just in terms of topical, that's been one of the challenges that we've had. With the weather being a bit better, with schools being on midterm, the last couple of weeks I've seen extensive queues at sort of Harewood, and working with the waste teams, we've extended the hours there, and we are looking at other mitigating actions in the short term and longer term solutions to it for the problem, which we can discuss at a later date. In terms of providing that intangible benefit, we provided some supervisory cover when sections of the waste team ended up having to self-isolate as a result of COVID. We helped with the sort of implementation and the rollout of the booking system in lockdown 1. We've also provided some additional support to other shareholders in North Yorkshire and the districts throughout. We sort of had a plan and developed a plan with the districts that if it had been a cataclysmic impact, we would eventually have redirected our staff to support in the collection of domestic waste. As it happens, I think all the districts, including CYC, did a very good job of managing the COVID throughout. And then from our customer base, we were the first local provider to basically offer contract cost-free suspension. The argument being is that if people aren't earning any money from their customers, how can you expect them to pay their bills? Effectively, you'd just be creating and adding to the injury to your customers. So we've allowed them to take contract-free suspension, and that's been well received. And we are also looking to delay our cost increases in the current year to allow people to recover somewhat from the COVID crisis and the impact it's had on businesses. In terms of the current year estimate, I think because we've streamlined the business, we've delayered management headcount is 50% less than it was 3 years ago. We've invested in those information systems and asset upgrades. We've got rid of loss-making contracts and activities. And all of this has allowed us to sort of focus on what we're supposed to be doing, our core activities, doing them well and responding quickly and flexible to the crisis. Originally, we were expecting a modest return to a very modest profit. Now we're going to substantially beat that as a result of all of the actions that we've taken this year. Now, looking into next year, we will be able to retain a lion's share of the cost savings we've delivered this year, but not all of them are deliverable in the long term. Therefore, sort of what we need to do is we are trying to avoid any further recourse or requirement from the shareholder to fund the aftercare liability. In previous years, we've explained that with the fall off of gas, there is very limited revenue coming in now, and it's not enough to cover the aftercare costs. What we're hoping to do is to be able to cover those costs going forward with the cost savings that we've achieved this year and looking to maintain next year. So overall, the revenue funding from the shareholders will be broadly the same, inflationally adjusted. In terms of next year, I think we've still got a bit of uncertainty over what's going to happen in the commercial environment. We're expecting COVID to continue to impact on Q1 revenues, but overall, we're confident that we're going to be able to deliver a small, modest profit next year, and within that, being able to meet the aftercare liability, despite the continuing gas revenues fall off. We also have in the current year and plan to next year, we will deliver the Tier Band 2 requirements at Allerton Park, which is a shareholder benefit, and we will be doing that at the target gate price, which in the current environment has been quite an achievement. That basically transfers value from Yorwaste to the shareholder via its investment at in Allerton Park. And both shareholders benefit in the same sort of proportions. And then going forward, we think we've got sufficient cash flow to meet our sort of business as normal investment requirements. What this means is that at this moment in time, we're not anticipating doing anything new or sexy. What we're anticipating on doing is our job in the best possible, most efficient value for money way that we can. And only where something complements and can be built into the existing operations would we look to sort of do anything that might be considered new or innovate or new. We'll continue to innovate in terms of cost reduction. Looking forward, the big challenges that we've got are the local government review, government waste strategy, and the configuration for Allerton Park to meet the outcomes of both the local government review and specifically the government waste strategy. So if we are mandated to have to do separate food waste collections, that will require some reconfigurations. And then from a recycling perspective, once we have got clarity on the longer term direction of that, that will also allow us to construct an offer that meets the shareholders' needs going forward on that. And then we've also mentioned there that there's opportunities for solar and wind power at both Harewood and Seamuccar. Solar may be less contentious at Harewood than wind power. However, if we are serious about the climate emergency, we need to at least quantify what that opportunity is, and then we will leave it to the planning powers and the authorities to decide whether they want to pursue that. What the current expectation is that we will spec solar requirements to meet the needs of Yorwaste, but we will design them in such a way that should the authority, as part of its climate reduction, wish to make use of the rest of the site or larger areas of the site, they will be able to plug in and piggyback on that investment. Therefore, we're once again maximising the overall shareholders' return. Yorwaste doesn't need to have that coming through its books. It's just sufficient that it's going back as a benefit to the authority. So that's it on Yorwaste. Any questions on that before I just quickly comment on SJB?
Well, I'd just like to thank you for what a fantastic précis of what you've done this year, and also for all the help, because the waste area is in my portfolio, and the help that you gave us all the way through the first lockdown and onwards has been fantastic. I'd also like to just say how brilliant that you've got a ROSPA Gold and you're health and safety record is so fantastic, knowing that the waste industry has got the second highest fatalities in the country. That is a real accolade. And if you layer on top of that the fact that you're delivering the living wage, which is unusual for this sector, and that you're moving into all the sustainability areas, it's an extremely powerful business case moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Andy?
I'd certainly echo that, and also welcome the comments about all the work you're doing on like H100, and the climate change initiatives. Certainly, that sounds very exciting opportunity for us to build on the commitment to tackling climate change.
So thank you. Moving on, some more good news, hopefully. So we've discussed in previous sessions about SJB and the fact that due to a change in the sort of regulations for co-composting, the business model and the locations proved untenable. The contracts that the previous business was built on, specifically local authorities in the sort of Leeds and Bradford area, have gone to a no volume commitment, no term commitment, which makes it very difficult to invest in capital equipment and have a fixed costs to deliver it. So the combination of the two basically meant it was uneconomic to keep SJB running. So we closed the doors to the final business last March. Since then, we've sort of liquidated the assets, and there is now remaining a cash balance of around about £1.3 million. We recommend as a management that this is repatriated to the shareholders in very round numbers, subject to the final amount. That would be approximately £1 million to North Yorkshire and 300,000 to City of York. And that is being proposed to the shareholder committee for their approval, as it is a reserve matter to wind up the company and pay final dividends.
I have no questions on that area. I'm just extremely impressed that you've managed to do it so quickly and efficiently.
Thank you.
No, that sounds excellent. I mean, obviously, every penny helps. I'm sure we will welcome that, and Paula will have plenty of good ideas of uses we can put to tackle our climate change.
Always.
Investment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've got a few questions in the private session, but I don't want to really raise them here, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine. Thank you, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much. So the next report is from Make It York. I'm assuming that's Sean. Yep.
That's right. Yes. Good afternoon.
Hi, Sean. How are you doing?
Very well. Nice to see you.
And yourself?
So yes, I will do. I'll follow the same format, I think, really as the other reports. In that, I will run through our activity report now, and then obviously delighted to take any questions. And then I think probably the financial bit is for the private session later on.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the same way as millions of other businesses up and down the country have found trading extremely difficult over the last year, so has Make It York, with most of our revenue streams continuing to be limited. Things remain difficult. A number of people on the call will be aware that we went to the CYC Executive Committee in December and asked for the approval of an investment package to help us through this difficult period. We were very appreciative of the fact that was granted, and it was linked to a new service level agreement, the discussions of which are ongoing. We're pretty much there, I think. It's a matter now of dotting I's and crossing T's, but we think we will come up with a well-described service level agreement which will deliver for the city. So that's a sort of background. In terms of our day-to-day operation, we continue to run this hybrid working model, basically most of the office staff working from home for the last 12 months, with the VIC being open when it can be, and Shambles Market has remained open almost completely throughout, at least for essential services and essential items and food. So yes, that's good. We've, like all businesses, I think we've had mixed response from staff to having to work from home. Some have been delighted, and productivity has been very good. Others have found it more difficult, and we've kept a careful eye, I think, on staff morale and well-being, and extended the dependent health cover to cover mental health issues as well. And with respect to office space, clearly we don't need a great deal at the moment, and we keep an open mind with an eye on cost as to what we might need going forward. Final point really on our internal workings, we are recruiting a new markets manager because of the central importance of that role, and in order to allow Russell McCartney, who's done that job over recent months, to step back and concentrate really on the more commercial elements of essentially what he was hired to do. And unfortunately, as of last week, we have lost our head of business, who went off to a new job in Hampshire, and how he's replaced will be determined by the emphasis on what he was doing in the new SLA, and where the roles and responsibilities sit, whether it's CYC or Make It York or elsewhere. So that's the internal. In terms of the businesses we've been conducting, just go through those by way of department. There's 4 departments. The business team, I think the highlight really for the business team over the last quarter has been the York Business Week, which attracted over 1,000 delegates, and albeit that it was virtual, of course, was really very well received, and covered a number of very interesting issues. Coming out of that, I think one of the innovations or elements of evolution is that we will run a number of pop-up events, including on Brexit and other issues throughout the year, branded as Business Week, to keep all those discussions and that networking flowing. We've continued to make the case for the Tech Accelerator, which I think is there's a consensus that York will benefit from. We've continued with our key account management, 54 company engagements over the last quarter. We've begun to see the emphasis moving slightly, I suppose, from the COVID survival position to generating sales, looking at securing the business pipeline to get going again. Cash flow, of course, remains a problem, notwithstanding any announcement yesterday in the budget. But some very positive movement on the property front, with high levels of interest in properties, particularly retail, but also more widely around the larger developments. So that's good to see, and would suggest we would in a reasonable position to bounce back, I think. And inward investment, we continue to handle inquiries from existing businesses within the city and from those looking to come to the city. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the emphasis in terms of who will deal most with that going forward will be handled in the SLA, and we'll be able to report back on to the next shareholders committee meeting. The second of the teams, the Culture and Wellbeing team, which is run by Helen Apsey, who works, of course, closely with Charlie Croft, who I think is on the call, and also with Daryl. I think the big event in relation to that department was the launch in December of the culture strategy, York's Creative Future, which maps out the future of cultural provision across the city from 2020 to 2025. It's had a significant gestation period, but it is a fundamentally very important and very York document, I think, putting young people's entitlement to cultural activities at its heart, as well as obviously the UNESCO opportunity. So very successful launch, and Helen and her team are now working with the cultural institutions in the city to make sure that they actually put flesh on the bones of each of the priority areas and deliver tangible projects to make that they're meaningful. So that's quite a sort of almost matrix-like project, but is going well and will be very valuable, I think.
Sean, we're going to go into private session later. Can I be rude and ask you to speed up a little bit, please?
Yes, certainly. You can indeed. I think the other point of note really is the event strategy, which Helen's team are drafting. They in a coordinated way with the cultural strategy, will come up with an events plan or strategy for the city with the City Council and various other players, obviously, in order that we have a quality programmed schedule of events over the year. In relation to marketing and comms, we have conducted our usual, rather interrupted leisure marketing, interrupted obviously because of the lockdown and then opening up and lockdown again. The Love York Awards were a particular highlight of that, with about 6,500 votes for favourite businesses, favourite operators during lockdown. So some good news about that. Equally, some very helpful case studies around business marketing, around the achievements of some of York's businesses in the key sectors, and case studies to illustrate those. And then on the commercial side of things, as a final point, as I mentioned, we struggle with most of our revenue sources, given that they are reliant on visitors in large part. Yeah, but we can talk about the detail of those, I think, in the private session.
Okay, I've just got a couple of comments from the papers. A couple of things I'd just like to clarify. You started by saying that the business week was down to Make It York. My understanding is that that is a joint venture between CYC and MIY. So therefore, the council should really also be thanked for the amount of effort and the office has put in that, or am I mistaken, Sean?
No, that's absolutely right. I think, technically speaking, I'm not sure whether it's a joint event, but you're absolutely right.
It is a joint event. Technically speaking, it is a joint event.
I was going to say it's slightly more complicated than that. You're absolutely right to highlight that it's with CYC, but it's also with significant contributions from the FSB, the IOD, etc.
Yeah, so there's lots of people involved.
You're absolutely right to highlight that it is a citywide event. I think technically the brand is owned by Make It York, but no, the contributions and the work comes from across the city, and I think that's what makes it so strong. So. Fair point, Paula.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. You said in the business week that there were lots of issues over the EU exits. Have you got any highlights of what we need to be thinking about for businesses?
Well, I think the issues that businesses in York face are those that businesses around the country face, or York and the region. So there are a whole range of businesses or sectors that we want to support by feeding back the issues they're facing to central government, reinforcing them. So, for example, the Centre for Early Music has had all sorts of European links and has thrived from those. And of course, it's much more difficult, as it is for the music and cultural sectors more generally. There are other sectors such as fishing, which isn't necessarily immediately in York, but is certainly in the region, who, as we know, are suffering as a result of some of the new restrictions. There will be businesses, and I can't name any off the top of my head, who are exporting to Northern Ireland, who have experienced difficulty. So it's those sorts of issues, I think, that we want to pick up and be able to represent back to government. And it is in no way rerunning the Brexit debate. That's all happened, but we need to highlight where businesses and business sectors need help.
Okay. The next point I'd just like to get again some clarification on is the tech accelerator. Mm-hmm. My understanding is that again is a CYC project. Am I mistaken?
No, that absolutely is, and I certainly didn't mean to give any other impression. I think.
Right. Okay, I got a different impression, so apologies.
No.
That is a CYC project, yeah.
Yes, indeed, and it's simply, I think, about trying to help make the case for it. Is what we're looking to do. But no, it's not our project.
Right, okay. And then I had one other point. I'd love to understand more about the inward investment. And I don't know whether that's because there's more information that we can discuss privately, but it would be really useful to understand the details behind who's talking to us, who's looking for stuff. So, but I'm assuming that'll be in the private session.
Yeah, or I mean, I don't think there's anything that can't be, in terms of somebody that can't be said publicly. I think it's very much a case of ongoing discussions between us and CYC and the LEP and others about exactly who is best positioned to deliver which elements of the process that is, or the continuum that is inward investment. And so we're working out the detail of that in the SLA discussions. But there's nothing other than consensus, I think, about the requirement and the opportunity, and that is to raise York's profile to as great an extent as we can as a place to do business in the sectors that we have genuine strengths, and there are a number. And we're working out the plan really of how you, on the one hand, for example, at one end of the continuum, you get York as a place on the radar of a Chinese investor who may never have heard of York, all the way through to how you get an investing business to sign on the dotted line, hand over the keys to the premises and employ the staff. So across that range, the different skills and experience we have in the city will be able to contribute to that continuum and development of a pipeline of economic growth.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Sean. I've got some more questions for in the private session. Andy? Councillor de Gaulle even.
One sort of broad comment, if you like, or rather than necessarily a question, is that obviously it's very difficult for businesses as well as organisations like Make It York in the current circumstances with so much uncertainty and change, and in particular for our cultural and hospitality sector, the fact that they're having to struggle with furloughing staff and so on, and then not knowing the exact time scale. But I think that Make It York, as well as the LEP and the BID and the other agencies in the city, have got an important role to play now in, I think the term is pivoting, in terms of thinking about how they've operated pre-pandemic and how that fits with the way of the world that we're moving into. I mean, some of them have very quickly changed their mode of operation, but things like the shift to online sales, the uncertainty about the scale of events that you're able to have, all those sorts of things. And is that something that Make It York has capacity to, if you like, lead these other agencies, but very much focused on York businesses?
I think that's a really interesting point, and I suppose I would answer it by saying that there's a sort of short-term and then a longer-term issue. I think it is very difficult at the moment. The council provided funding for post-COVID tourism marketing, etc., which of course events precluded. We have at various points looked at an events program which we hoped would be up and running for Easter, but of course that's delayed things. So there's a great deal of uncertainty, and we are working closely with the BID and people at the Retail Forum and the hoteliers to make sure that we are as agile on that as we can. I think the other question, I suppose, is the slightly longer term issue about any sort of systemic changes which result to city centres more generally. So as retail, particularly, or that sort of mid-sized retail becomes less relevant in a city centre, arguably, how we go about making sure that the experience is sufficient to make people come and enjoy it and spend money, albeit differently. So I had a conversation yesterday with the Retail Forum, and they were talking about the demand levels for small properties in York, which remain very high. So small independent SMEs looking to set up in York, and demand is high. Once you get over about 15,000 square feet, there is less demand for property. So the question then becomes, how do you split those properties up? How can you divide them physically? Can you put them to other uses? Can you combine uses? Can you make them flexible? So I think in the slightly longer term, we certainly, like all other cities, need to look at what the city centre is for. But I do feel optimistic about that for York, in that it is an enormously attractive place, physically, historically, etc. in terms of offer. So I think we're in a much stronger position to bounce back than another town or city that doesn't have the assets we have.
Thank you.
Okay, many thanks, Sean. And we'll move on to the final company and come back to you in the private session. Thank you. So I'm afraid I don't know the name of
Simon Hill, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you, Janie. Simon, oh, there you are. It's like Mr. Ben. It's the way we're all appearing on these things. Shows you my age. So if I could ask you to follow in the footsteps of everybody else and do your presentation, please, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. So I'll try and rattle through it if I can. I think the first comment would be that, although I'm going to give quite a lot of detailed figures, everything that I'm going to go through is in the public domain anyway.
Right, okay.
That's very much part of our ethos as a publicly owned organisation. The second is just perhaps to provide some context between the two organisations that are represented here. YPO, which is a joint committee of 13 local authorities, so it doesn't exist as a corporate body, but acts with the 13 authorities acting in unison together. And that is probably what most people know, that's been in existence for 45 years as a largely an education supplier, but also as a supplier of products to local government. There is then YPO Procurement Holdings, which is a limited company. It's a separate organisation. It has the same shareholders, so the same 13 local authorities are legal shareholders of that business. It has no employees and is purely a trading mechanism to trade with private bodies which fall outside of the Local Government Goods and Services Act. And examples of that would be nurseries, who largely nowadays are private businesses or private individuals, care homes that are increasingly private businesses. So these are providers of a public service that nowadays are provided through a private mechanism rather than public traditionally, and we just need a trading mechanism to be able to continue to provide products to that area. Both organisations operate on purely commercial income. About 80% of it comes through from education, the rest from local government. So of course, for 2020, both of them will have been significantly impacted by big holes in that income with school closures for a large part of the year due to the pandemic. The year before, and this is fairly typical, the joint committee turns over about 115 million a year and makes about £8 million profit, which is distributed back into the public purse and to its shareholder local authorities, City of York Council obviously being one. The limited company, very different scale, turns over about 1.5 million and makes about a 30,000 profit. So you can see this is kind of a peripheral business feeding, as I say, organisations at the margins of our core business. So coming to 2020, the joint committee, as I've said, was significantly impacted by a number of things. So the cost of the pandemic, there was some disruption at the start of the year due to the implementation of a new IT system, which did cause some operational disruption, which had a cost associated with it. We then had a plan to acquire a private competitor, Findel Education, that was actually blocked in October by the Competition and Markets Authority. So although we incurred a lot of the costs leading up to that, about £1.5 million, we didn't then get the benefits and the synergies that were going to come from the acquisition. So all of those three elements, the costs of which have been borne within 2020. There was reduction in income as well, so about 98 million versus the 115 from before, but obviously the cost base, the overhead base, remained the same. We did, I'm pleased to say, despite that, and with a lot of kind of efficiency measures during the year, managed to still make a 1.8 million trading surplus. But if you take the exceptional costs, that did go down to a £2.9 million loss. One of the exceptional items was actually a write-down of PPE. So at the beginning of the pandemic, back in April, May of last year, we kind of, the phrase was used by Councillor de Gaulle earlier on, pivoted our activity to close down our commercial activity and actually become a commissioned provider of PPE equipment to local governments and in some cases to central government as well. In the early stages of that phase, the costs of acquiring that went through the roof, and the market price of PPE was extreme. On behalf of local government, we purchased a lot of PPE. Central government then were doing their own thing in tandem, and in September essentially flooded the market with free provision because they offloaded the stocks that they had bought to schools. And when you flood a market with free products, guess what? The price drops significantly. So we were left with quite a legacy. I am personally still trying to pursue compensation for that from central government. And if we are able to do that, then the benefit will come back to the member authorities, including City of York Council. But at the moment, we thought it was prudent to take the write down of that within the financial year of 2020. And I should mention that we have a calendar financial year. So when I talk about these years, it is a January to December financial year that I'm talking about. Very similar story on the limited company. So instead of the 1.5 million, it turned over about £500,000 last year and made an £11,000 loss compared to the 34,000 budgeted profit for very similar reasons. So all of the activity that I've talked about impacted the limited company in the same way. There was an additional element in that we made an investment 3 years ago in a startup business, EdTech Impact, which is an online learning provider. That was again significantly affected last year and is running behind its business plan in any case. So the prudent advice that we got was to write down the value of that investment in 2020 and then build it back up again as the company trades its way out of the impact over the next few years. And to be honest, the kind of professional advice that we've had is, in a bad year like 2020, it's better to take all of the hits and then draw a line and move on. And that is the approach that we have taken in that case. So the plan for 2021 is very much a recovery year. And what we want to do, it's a bit of an overused phrase, but get back to basics, get back trading, get back producing a trading surplus, get back returning that dividend to our founder member authorities, and then use this year as a solid platform from which to grow over the following 3 years from 2022. So our ambition for this year and the plan that we have is to get back to the 115 million turnover, 8 million surplus for the joint committee, and the 1.5 million turnover for 30,000 profit for the limited company.
Many thanks for that, and thank you for telling me it was a calendar year, not a financial year, because that stops me asking some of the daft questions I would have otherwise asked you. So many thanks for that, Simon. Listening to you have plans in place. You know that this year has been extraordinary. Absolutely. And are you confident that the world will return enough to your commercial model to actually generate the turnover and the profits that you're considering? And how do you, and I absolutely agree with what your accountant will have told you, which is very bad news in the worst year that's going. Get rid of all the costs possible. Yeah. Absolutely agree with that. But how are you going to also weave in the online learning, because people are now used to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose the exception to what I described in terms of the back to basics is the whole digital agenda. So two aspects of that: the online learning, absolutely. So getting the EdTech Impact company up to speed very quickly, and that is going well. But I think also recognizing that the world of retail, and we are essentially a retailer, has changed dramatically in the last 12 months. So alongside our day-to-day activity, we are investing heavily in a digitalisation programme. So big investment, about £500,000 this year in our website, making that much more functional. And I know it's that there's some sensitivity around Amazon and Amazon as an organisation, but it's a very useful kind of shorthand for the digital experience that we want to offer to our customers, especially schools. So we're finding nowadays that teachers, particularly, they're very time poor. The ability to order in the evening on an app on their phone is something that we're investing in this year. The traditional catalogue in the staff room on the coffee table that's passed around and order forms filled in manually, those days are disappearing rapidly, and my expectation is probably the catalogue that we produce this time is likely to be the last one, and going forward into 22 and beyond, a much more purely digital offering.
Many thanks. You'd hope I could work this after a year of doing it. Councillor de Gorn, do you have any questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you. That's very useful.
Janie, I'm going to ask for some guidance at this point. Simon, if everything that we've discussed is in the open, I have no other questions on the reports, the sheets that you've got behind. But if everything's in the open, yeah, you do not need to stay for the private session at the end if that's allowable, so that you can get on with your day.
Okay.
Is that okay? Are you happy with that?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's all of the businesses. So the only other area that we need to discuss before we go into private session is the shareholder committee work plan. Is that correct, Janie, or do we do that afterwards? No, we can do that now.
No, we can discuss that now.
Perfect.
Chair. So it is good practice for every committee here at City of York to have a work plan. What Debbie and I have put together is the formulation, the startings really of a work plan that we can build upon as these meetings progress. Can I just make one amendment, however? The work plan indicates that for Veritau, the lead officer is Max Thomas. Actually, it's myself.
Okay.
So I am the council's lead officer. It was Debbie until I arrived, and then I've assumed the role from Debbie, and Debbie is now on the board of directors for Veritau. So I would just like to make that amendment. Obviously, with your consent, both Debbie and I, as the Section 151 and the monitoring officer, would like to consult with you in order to populate this work plan further and to give greater clarity around sort of expectations that you have of the various companies for future meetings. And obviously, with our proposed revised governance arrangements in place, we want to see how we can incorporate those arrangements into a much more meaningful work plan going forward. So this is part of those amendments to governance to support this committee. And there's also my colleague here today, who is Dan Moynihan. He's a senior corporate lawyer in legal services for City of York. Himself and his colleague Catherine Moore will also be assisting yourself, Chair, and Councillor de Gorn as well with the governance arrangements and the development of the work plan on a much more operational basis as well.
Okay, many thanks. You've got my consent to do the relevant and the necessary work on the work plan. Councillor de Gorn?
Yes, thank you for that. And I think on this paper, we were on at item 10, paragraph 3 actually lists those companies. That's quite helpful to draw attention to, for that is a list of the organisations that we have a responsibility for as shareholders.
I think there's been debate earlier about the role of the lead officers, who are the link links for the City of York links to the various companies. We will wish to consult with yourself and Chair and Councillor de Gorn going forward about the role that those link or lead officers have at this committee at future meetings as well. So, and again, that's part of our considerations around improving governance for this committee. So you indicated earlier we've started having conversations with you, Councillor Widdowson, so hopefully we can continue those
absolutely
in line with the work plan.
I think that would be really useful.
Sandy's just put his hand up.
Chair, I was looking, this is the first time I've seen the work plan, but if I could just make you aware, in terms of budgets, we tend not to be in a position to discuss final budgets until December. So September would be far too early to talk about the business plan.
Well, one of the things I was thinking, Sandy, before you continue, one of the things that I was going to discuss offline with Janie is I actually don't think some of the companies need to come 3 times a year.
Okay.
Because I think some of them are robust enough, and what you keep telling us is what you keep delivering, and therefore we could look at moving some of it around. So don't worry, I'm not going to get you to do loads of different work that you don't need to, and we're not going to ask you to do a budget before you can put it together. We will run it by you. It is not a finalised list.
But that's absolutely fine. I just wanted to make sure that you got the sequencing in the right order. So
perfect.
More than happy to come 3 or 4 times, whatever you need to feel comfortable.
Well, you see, if you offer to buy me a gin each time, I might be 5. Anyway.
Once the restrictions are passed, be happy to do so. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor de Gorn.
Yeah, just I think, as has been highlighted, perhaps the work plan is intended to be helpful to us. And so it would probably be useful after this meeting if this was to be circulated to the representatives of these different companies and ask for that sort of feedback about what fits.
Absolutely. And the conversation
and what's most appropriate time for us to be having those conversations with them.
Absolutely. And the conversation I've had with Janie and her team, they'd already taken that into account. It is literally a straw man, a starter for 10. They are extremely expert in what they do. So we will get the right number and the right order and the right format.
Absolutely, Chair, and obviously take on board the views from the public participant as well, and listening to the comments that we've had throughout the meetings thus far. So you're quite right. This is literally a starter for 10, and it's part of building blocks for more robust governance arrangements for this committee going forward.
Thank you. I think there isn't any urgent business from this part, so I think that that's the end of the public session. Yes? Excellent. Many thanks for those of you watching, and many thanks for those of you who have participated. Can all the business people stay, because we're going to go into private session and have a discussion regarding the business plans.